Let us get on with the topic. Let's get it on. Here is Governor Charles Soludo. Please take a listen.
Students can do something. Academics can do something. Intellectualism without action, without activism is sterile. Curiosity and critical thinking and questioning the status quo as major elements of intellectualism. This is what it is about. The university that I know used to start from doubt, questioning everything before getting to be convinced, isn't it? We debate and not to accept it as it is. And here I will challenge you in a few ways. Part of my casual observation, however, is that our universities, not exclusively this one, and academics have significantly lowered the bar in terms of rigorous critical thinking and intellectual discourse, without which the university loses much of its salt. The hunger for knowledge and intellectual curiosity is alarming at a low. So three issues I will raise with you, just to challenge you, just to say this curiosity, even what is said, there must be a bit of it. And I will share a few things where perhaps there might be opposition matters scenarios. One issue is state creation. Another is Igbo marginalization. Another is Biafra agitation. Let me take the Biafra question first. For about 27 years, the Biafra question resurrected and hovered over Igbo political consciousness like an unexorcised ghost. It has inspired armed insurgency, sustained diaspora grievance, and cost this region incalculable lives and economic opportunities. The sit-at-home phenomenon has gripped the Southeast from 2021, that gripped us to 2021, destroyed businesses, closed schools, and imposed a massive tax on production. By several estimates, the Southeast lost hundreds of billions of naira in those years of internal conflict. This loss is not government revenue. It's the fact that that bricklayer who ought to go, who goes to a daily toy, that woman selling akara to feed her children, these people who got balls for them to feed, you debar them one day every week. People who used to come from all other parts of the world to come to shop in the Southeast had to boycott, and businesses started relocating elsewhere. We had human capital fled, infrastructure deteriorated, and the investment dried up. But now I want to pose this question to this assembly of professors. Is there any single university, a single department of political science, history, economics, public policy, or international relations that has rigorously, scientifically, and dispassionately examined the rationality or irrationality of Biafran secession as a political economic project? Not as propaganda, not as sentiment, not as agitation or reflective rejection, but as a genuine intellectual question subjected to the full weight of academic rigor. But this debate needs to happen, not in a jungle, not in encrypted online channels, not in inflammatory social media posts that generate heat but produce no light. The debate should happen in lecture halls like here, at symposia with methodology and peer review and the full arsenal of the academic enterprise. If the argument for separation is sound, let it withstand scholarly scrutiny. If it is not, as I deeply believe it is not, let that also be demonstrated not by coercion, but by the superior force of better reasoning. I'm looking forward to that debate. If this debate has not happened, and UNN of all places has not championed it, it is in itself an intellectual scandal. Because many of us must recall that the Biafra War was literally declared in this very auditorium. But for this to be going on now for decades at this same auditorium has not made it a subject matter of inquiry or debate in rigorous inquiry. It's a little bit scandalous. It is a scandal for which the professoriate must answer. When serious scholars vacate the space, it is not left empty. It is occupied by propagandists, by conspiracy voices, and by shallow populism. And propagandists, as history teaches us repeatedly, are very good at filling vacuum. Let me be direct. You cannot be pretending to discuss the future of Ndigbo in Nigeria or mainstreaming their position in a federal Nigeria without clarity on where you stand vis-a-vis separatist Biafra agitation. You can't have both. You can't have your two legs, one hand. You are here, you are here. No, you will not move. I have stated my position too many times. I am a pan-Nigerian, pan-Africanist, and believe that Igbos are best served in a united and fairer Nigeria. That's my own belief, and I am prepared to engage when that debate comes up for us to argue. Let both sides present the argument. But the intellectuals must lead the way. Can't shy away. The Monday sit at home, you hide under the bed. If we win your arrow, so money I'm going to
That was the governor of Anambra State, Governor Chukwuma Soludo. Fantastic speech, brilliant ideas, right? But there's an assumption in that speech. And the assumption is that intellectuals have been completely quiet. And I beg to differ. I think the intellectuals have spoken, but I think they have done what he wasn't expecting them to do, which is engage in propaganda. In other words, what he is saying is that subject this idea to intellectual rigor, right? Debate it, talk about its pros and cons, talk about the entire thing, shred it open, shred it apart, discuss it, understand what happened, right? Then you're able to hopefully draw the lessons. You have the peer-reviewed, in the peer-reviewed environment, you're able to actually go deep into stuff, right? Without having to think about emotions. And I want to read something, something that's very, very striking in this, in what he said. He said, is there any single university in Nigeria, any single department that has rigorously, scientifically, and passionately examined the rationality and irrationality of Biafra secession as a political economic project, not as propaganda, not as agitation, but as a genuine intellectual question subjected to the full weight of academic rigor? That speech and that expectation is correct, is right. That's how you have conversations that actually bring out the lessons from your past. That's how you raise a new generation that doesn't repeat the mistakes of the past, and they're able to build something better than their parents, which is why I like to talk about Yoruba history. And even in talking about Yoruba history, as great as we are as a people, there are things that have happened in the past that are also cool, and we talk about those things. And the beautiful thing about it is that you can have that conversation not to spite the elders, not to spite our forebears, but to be able to learn the lessons. It's the same thing with Biafra. It's the same thing with Nigerian Civil War. But rather than folks use that civil war as a tool to learn whatever it is that they shouldn't do, they have decided to weaponize stuff based on what he was talking about, propaganda. If there was anything that was allowed to reproduce itself, so to speak, in the war effort, it's actually propaganda more than anything else. As a matter of fact, I dare to say that a lot of people who are angry today and who lash out and who say things about the war and say how terrible Nigerians are and how every other person is bad but their own fathers, the reason is not even because of what happened. It's because of the propaganda that they've heard. Therefore, that is what is sustaining the agitation. In other words, without the propaganda and the single narrative and the victim narrative and the lies, there's nothing to agitate. And to attack that is to come against their faith, their belief system. Because some people have built their entire life around that structure of victimhood. But I play that just to give you an idea that what I'm about to say is not new. Of course, the only thing is that I have to read a lot of books to be able to get the information. But it's not like I'm creating anything. There are professors who have questioned these things, who have written about it, and the work really. And this is the interesting thing about Nigeria's history. It's not that there are no books. I hear people say things a lot. Nigerian people don't, Nigerian history, they don't write the books. We don't even know what happened. It's because there are books. Let me not say it's because many people are not reading. There are books. There are many books. Some you find truth, some you find a mixture of truth and lies, some you find absolute, like, just lies. And one of the major intellectuals who have arisen out of the Southeast is Chinua Achebe. And when you read his memoir or his last book, There Was a Country, and you read a bit about Biafran War, you'll be asking the question, is he doing what Governor Charles Soludo is asking for, or is he doing exactly what he's speaking against? And I'll tell you this, he's doing exactly what Chukwuma Soludo is speaking against. Propaganda. And it's not surprising, considering that he, Achebe, was a propagandist for Biafra. Himself, Uchechukwu Merije, Okokon Ndem, these people worked in Radio Biafra. And if you read Nelson Ota's book, I read it here before, the weaponization of the media during the war and the fallout of it is actually what I think people are actually suffering from today, more than what happened. And I'm not saying that people did not suffer, to be clear. People suffered. Terrible things happened, right? People starved. People died. However, it wasn't just one-sided. It happened on both sides. But regardless of the sides that it happened, the effects are real. Okay? However, the narratives have lasted longer than the events of the past. In other words, the memories of the events are not as even active as the narratives around those events. So the narratives have lasted much longer than the memories of the event. I want to read something to you from Nelson Ota before we listen to the young lady in question. I'm going this way because I don't want you to look as if she'll say something and I'll begin to speak and I'll be like, why? Let's try and set a background for what we're about to get into. Ota released a book titled The Trial of Biafra's Leaders. And I'd like to read something from there just to give people an idea, about how we got where we are. It says here, Ojukwu and his aides, still very much ensconced in the comparative safety and comfort of the State House, Enugu, were determined not to listen to or cooperate with the field commander. Millions of the inmates of Ojukwu's monolithic empire fed on nothing but the fanfaronade being dished out by Radio Biafra, and so still convinced that no force in Black Africa could bring the Biafran empire down, were not listening either. So he said millions of the inmates of Ojukwu's monolithic empire, he sees the people as inmates, almost like prisoners. Monolithic empire essentially is about Igbo, the ethnicity and the narrative. And they fed on nothing but the fanfaronade being dished out by Radio Biafra, and they were still convinced that no force in Black Africa could bring the Biafran empire down, and so they were not listening to anybody. Stay with me. The euphoria was too massive to allow either doubt or dissent. Lieutenant Colonel Banjo, the pessimist and coward, could go on clocking all over the place like a fussy hen. Enugu was still under this propaganda-induced mass hypnosis. When the troops of the 2nd Division of the Federal Nigerian Army recaptured Benin from the secessionist troops on 20th September 1967, Lieutenant Colonel Banjo had, even before the fall of the ancient city, removed his headquarters to Agbo. Things were no better for Ojukwu on the Nsukka front. It was in the same month of September that Major T.Y. Danjuma had issued to his troops an order of battle that read, "Mission to capture Enugu by 1800 hours on D7. When the 1800 hours struck, Major Danjuma and his troops started to advance rapidly towards Enugu. This was in the morning of 12 September 1967. Major Danjuma's advance brought him and his troops to such towns between Nsukka and Enugu as Akwebe, in which a young Nigerian intellectual, Major Christopher Okigbo, was killed after his battalion headquarters had been outflanked, Ikolo, Ogbede, Umulengbe, and Okpatu. At this time, Radio Biafra, please pay attention to what I'm about to read. At this time, Radio Biafra was still busy announcing the recapture of Nsukka and Okwe. Nigerian forces don't enter, collect Nsukka from them. conquer Okpi. They advance, come Enugu. Don't enter Enugu, but Radio Biafra, they tell the people, say, they don't recapture the place where they don't lose since. So he says, so they had what was the word now? They had captured towns such as Nsukka, Enugu, and Akwebe, Ikolo, Ogbede. Sorry, Nsukka, Enugu, Akwebe, Ikolo, Ogbede, Umulumbe, and Okpatu. At this time, Radio Biafra was still busy announcing the recapture of Nsukka and Okpe. That mindset of propaganda, that's what I want to actually establish before we listen to the girl. This game of mass deception continued until the advancing federal troops, probably angered by the blatant lie-telling of the Enugu radio station, lumped over 2 artillery shells which fell within a few yards of the broadcasting studio and set the broadcasters running. This incident took place in the morning of 26 September 1967. Within Enugu itself, events were marching furiously, although the mass hypnosis, which was at the time very effective, was still obscuring realities. Men and women in the streets were still telling themselves that they were still telling themselves and their neighbors that there was no danger, that the artillery shells, which were then exploding with uncomfortable frequency, were new weapon systems being tested by Biafran scientists. If you are a young Igbo person today, and your grandfather or great-grandfather, I don't know, because a lot of people are very young. I just discovered myself. I didn't know, but I discovered people are very young. You have people who are talking to you. Listen, age has nothing to do with this, to be clear. Like, information doesn't care. If you have information, that's okay. But you cannot be 20, 19, 21, who hasn't read a thing in your life, apart from nursery rhymes. You are telling Nigeria's history based on what your grandfather told you. Alone. Your grandfather is a resource, but alone, how will I listen to you now? Imagine your grandfather now tells you, your great grandfather, whoever in your family, tells you that Biafran scientists were testing their weapons in Enugu on September 21, 1967, or September 26, 1967, and they were just making all that noise because the Biafran scientists were really testing stuff. I'm supposed to believe that because your grandfather said that. But in reality, your grandfather believed that because Radio Biafra had told them that they had Biafran scientists testing stuff. Meanwhile, it was actually Nigerian forces forcing them out of their broadcasting stations where they were lying to your fathers and your grandfathers. So the rest of Nigeria should believe what your grandfather said rather than the reality of what really happened. You get what I'm saying? So what Otta calls mass hypnosis, called it induced mass hypnosis, such that people could be dying and they'll be telling you why they're dying, but the reason is different from why they're dying. E.g., when you talk about the starvation, which was a very terrible thing, by the way, a lot of people will die on the hill that Nigeria was responsible for the starvation. Was there starvation? Yes. Did people die of hunger? Yes. Was it good? There's nothing to celebrate about that. It's a terrible thing. The question, who was responsible? That's a question. Who would you hold responsible for that? And the answer, you'll find it not in the Nigerian, you'll find it in Robert Goldstein's letter, August 1968. It was published in Morning Post, Lagos. I'm closing my eyes. I'm picturing the letter. You'll find it in the book by Godwin Sama, The Tragedy of Victory. And in that letter, he talked about how Ojukwu was not even allowing food to enter the East. It's a long story. We've done videos on it, so you can check out our videos on YouTube. Look for how Ojukwu, has to be something about how Ojukwu did not allow his people to eat, something like that, or how Ojukwu starved his people, something like that. The letter was a profound discovery for me, because I was like, how on earth would you be the leader of a people and you would starve them intentionally? Goldstein was the PR, was the public relations representative, right, of Biafra in the United States. He had gone to help, canvass for food and stuff, and it was saying, this was his words: the food, milk, and medicine were available, right? They just want Ojukwu to allow these things to enter. But what Ojukwu was doing was taking pictures of dying people and using that picture as propaganda in international newspapers, and he succeeded. So that today in 2026, when you see that picture, by the way, if you see that picture and you don't feel bad, something is wrong with you. Because if you just like and so what, that means that you have a problem. Oh, let's be telling ourselves the truth. There's no way you see that picture if you have blood coursing through your veins that you will not feel pity, sympathy for the people going through that. It was a terrible situation, but a man was taking the picture and using it for propaganda purposes. Now, am I the one making this up? No. And there are many sources. I just gave you one. Now, if a person comes around and says, see what Nigerians did to our people, and I say, well, I understand what your grandparents went through, or your parents, I understand what they went through was terrible, but hey, this is what happened, and I break it down. And like, you hate us, you're a bigot, you're a tribalist. You are not thinking. Because in your mind, we have to forget what really happened and go by what Radio Biafra has taught you. Excuse me, and that should be our history. No, it can't be our history. We're not that dumb. We're not even dumb to begin with. Another example. There's a man called Okonkwo Ndem who used Radio Biafra to tell everybody in Igbo land, right, that the food that the Nigerian government was sending to Igbo land was poisoned. He said it was poisoned. There are young Biafrans who still believe that thing till today. Sorry, young Igbos. I don't know whether they're Biafrans. I don't even know where to put people, because, and that's what Governor Soludo was saying. You have one leg in Nigeria, one leg in Biafra. You want presidency, but you want your own nation. We don't know where you are. So whichever one we call you, it is well. Some people still believe that Nigerians were poisoning them. What they do not know is that if you read Chief Awolowo's interview, 1983 presidential campaign in Abeokuta, and I'm going to read part of it today. What actually happened was that, number one, Nigeria was sending food that they should not have sent. And listen, I say it boldly. When you are fighting a war, your enemy doesn't owe you nada. Let's be realistic. You want to fight a war, you should have used your brain to think of the food that Ojukwu granted an interview in 1970. It was September 1970. It was to Frederick Forsyth, where he said that he did not even plan for the food before the war. He said it. I just want to move a lot from the topic today, because I want to respond to a particular video. I'm just trying to set a stage. He said he didn't really plan for what they're going to eat. How is that my own fault as a Yoruba man, as a Nigerian? Why should I think I bear a burden? Why should I bear that responsibility as a Nigerian for the mistakes of Ojukwu, when Ojukwu himself said that he did not plan for your feeding or your parents' feeding? So number one, Nigeria did not owe the Southeast food. In fact, they could tell the people not to send food. Why? Because they are not responsible for that region that's been cut off. It's a war. War is not good though. May we not have wars in this country. All people on social media are saying that they want to fight war, there must be a war. It's not PlayStation, no. And most of these clowns, ordinary GT, what's that game they play? They're always losing. They can't even shoot gun in PlayStation. You think they will not have wars. But here's the thing: despite the fact that Nigeria did not owe the Southeast, the food was still allowed to get into the south, so into the Igbo heartland, into the eastern region. But what most people did not, know, and I will always discover this when he eventually went to Port Harcourt during the war, was that the food that they were sending was being hijacked by Biafran soldiers, and the food was diverted to feed soldiers, lecturers, pharmacists, Radio Biafra people, including the person that was saying that the food was poisoned. That's why, and I was correct to say this. I always said this, by the way. He said that's why you notice that when it was time for them, when they traveled to Lagos to surrender, none of them looked like they had kwashoko, because they were feeding. If you were useful to Ojukwu, he fed you. So they feed a particular class of people, fed a particular class of people with the food coming in from quote unquote Nigeria, and then told the rest of the people to feed on the lies that the food that was sent was poisoned. And the person telling you literally ate that food, he ate that food in the morning before telling you that the food was poisoned. But you want me to believe the propaganda, even though the person who is talking to you, I know he ate in the morning, and the food he ate is the same food that was sent. Meanwhile, the whole issue of kwashoko and why there was no food is even another topic entirely. The Southeast has always had issues with food, and that's not a jab, just historically factual. They've always had issue with food, particularly protein-rich food. No meat, no fish, because for the fish they had to go to rivers area. For the meat they had to go to northern part of the eastern region. That's towards Obudu. With the war, those parts were cut off. Therefore, there was no protein. If you want to know more about that, read the book The Nigerian Civil War by John Desenjo. Having said all this long Turenchi, let's listen to the video we want to respond to now. I think we've said enough so that when I begin to respond, you will not say it's a bit harsh. I may be a bit harsh though, but I'll try not to. Let's take a listen to the young lady whose video was sent to me and is the reason for this conversation. Take a listen, please.
You know how every time an Igbo person brings up the Civil War or Biafran War, somebody who is not Igbo will say, "Oh, why are you still talking about that? That happened so long ago. Haven't you moved on? Nigeria has moved on."
I've never heard that thing said. I think most Nigerians have been hoodwinked and blackmailed by the Biafran story. They rarely say move on. Maybe you are talking to yourself because you're wondering like, we should have moved on. Why have we not moved on? So you're trying to now put other people in that category. For the most part, when Nigerians hear about the Civil War, they're usually very calm. They don't just say move on. It's not the attitude of most Nigerians, because a lot of them are predisposed to feeling sorry, to being empathetic, beyond even feeling sorry, beyond sympathy, to putting themselves in your shoes. So for the most part, I don't usually hear, and maybe they should be saying that more for now, because you are calling for it and it's important. I don't usually hear that. They don't usually say, "Oh, Nigeria has moved on, you move on." They don't usually say, because we'll talk about what Nigeria did to help these people. If they tell you to move on, they have a point. But for the most part, they don't even say, Nigerians don't usually say move on. They're usually like, hey, yeah. And that hey, yeah, concept is the reason you have been just moving anyhow. People have just been looking at you. But that stops now. Let's continue.
Well, I'm here to answer the question properly today as to why we haven't moved on. So the Biafran War, or genocide if we're being honest, and
it was not a genocide. You know what? Let me play a bit, because if I stop every time, we won't live here. And I'll explain why I say it was not a genocide. It was a war. Let's continue.
ended 15th January 1970. And when the war ended, General Gowon came and said, "No victor, no vanquish. It is time for reconstruction, rehabilitation, and reintegration. The Igbos are our brothers, so let them come home." We were given £20, irrespective of how rich you were before the war or the number of properties you owned. It did not matter. You got £20. In 1952, 7 years after.
So she made a number of claims. Again, the plan of the objective of some of these videos is to actually appeal to pity. That's what it's all about. Appeal to pity. But it's not going to work. What's a genocide? What is genocide? According to the United Nations Genocide Convention, genocide refers to certain acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. Was that what Biafra was? No. Biafra, that's war. It was a war, and it was, again, I speak like this not as somebody who is flippant or who doesn't care that people suffered. It was a terrible thing. But we've got to be very careful with definitions. That's how Ojukwu said there was a pogrom in 66. It was not a pogrom. It was a massacre, and it was terrible. It wasn't a pogrom. Words have meanings. In the Southeast, every word means something different. For instance, marginalization means something. marginalization in the southeast, actually in Igbo mindset, it is when you don't allow them to dominate, you are marginalizing them. What have meanings? Genocide, when you say genocide, it wasn't like they came with the intent to destroy Igbo people. That was not what it was. It was that you were trying to cut off a part of Nigeria beyond your own homeland. And to be clear, Biafra was an Igbo project that was basically about expansionism. You're taking people's lands and resources and trying to create a nation against their own will, killing them in their land, which we're going to talk about today. I hope we have the time. Killing them in their own land, whether it was in Rivers or in Cross River or in Akwa Ibom or in present-day Bayelsa or in Edo State or in Delta State or in Kogi State, in Benue State, in Lagos State, in Ondo State, killing people. And they say, oh, see, that's not that's a war. That's war. It wasn't like they were like, okay, we're going to wait. What do we do? These people in this particular part of the country, we're going to go there and destroy them. That's not what it was. It's not a genocide. You can use all the words and try to, get that emotional response, but this is the emotional response you're getting. The truth. That's the first part. Did people die? Yes. Was it good? No. Did Nigerians also die? Yes. Was there genocide against Edo people when they were killing them, or against Yoruba people when they were killing them? And these people don't talk about what young people need to know what happened. I like have a holistic understanding of what happened. So I don't say we have not moved on. If you like, don't move on. You can spend the next 1,000 years not being healed. That's your business. But to now manipulate the rest of the country into just see what you did to me, it's not going to. And you will see where she's going with this, by the way. That's when you understand why I'm very angry, because I'm actually angry now. But of course, we don't push everything out at the same time, because we have to do everything respectfully, right? You will see where she's going with all this. But here's the thing: you can't use words, right, and act as though words have no meanings. That's first thing. Number two, people died. It was a terrible thing. It was a war. It wasn't a genocide. Number three, 20 pounds. She said Igbos got 20 pounds no matter what they saved. That's not true. Let's begin by saying that the 20 pounds Igbo got after the war was not a debt that Nigeria owed them. Okay? Nigeria did not owe Igbo people. It wasn't like they did something for Nigerian government and like, how do we pay them back? Or remove everything they had, just give them 20 pounds. That's not what happened. In actual fact, what happened was the magnanimity of people like Awolowo and Gowon to Igbo people. There was a war in the United States of America. There was a civil war. The Confederates did not get 1 cent after they lost. Which is why when she said, Gowon said, no victor, no vanquish, I said earlier, one thing, I mean, there are two things I don't like that Gowon did. And like I said, I don't judge him over those things, but I understand he was young, but it's something that people should never make. That is a mistake we should never make again. You can't say no victor, no vanquished. It's an emotional statement that really has no substance. Especially when you are dealing with a people at a particular level of evolution, as a culture, as a society, where things are easily weaponized. Even before that period, they've been weaponizing stuff since the 1940s. It was so bad that by January 47, Arthur Richards, the Governor General of Nigeria, was saying that these people are always clamoring for more and more of everything, but they contribute the least in the country. Knowing what you know, you can't say no victor, no vanquish. Of course there was a victor, of course there was a vanquished, of course Nigeria won, of course Igbos lost. It wasn't this Eastern region that lost. You'll be joking if you think that the Eastern region lost that war. The Eastern region did not fight that war. Were there people from other parts of the East that were not Igbos in the army? Yes. Ask the question, what happened to their own people in that region? They were killed. The Eastern region did not lost. The Igbos lost because it was an Igbo war. That's why when you hear people that are always shouting about Biafra, it's Igbos. For whatever reason. I think for obvious reasons, to be honest. Here's the thing. There was a victor, Nigeria. There's a vanquished, the Igbos. And it should have been better for them to be told that in 1970 than for you to say no victor, no vanquished. Because like I said earlier, when you say no victor, no vanquished, you create a vacuum. The person who lost knows that he's not the victor. He can't claim to be victor. He knows that he lost. He doesn't want to say he's vanquished because he has ego, which is natural. He doesn't want to say, because of course, he can't say that because you didn't pronounce it. So why should he say it to himself or use it to describe himself? Therefore, a vacuum exists, which has to be filled because nature abhors a vacuum. So what does it do? He weaponizes the situation by creating villains and victims. He makes the victors the villains and makes the vanquished the victims. And so in the story, the villain, the vanquished is a perpetual victim in every narrative that has to do with Nigeria. And the victors are seen as villains, like they are terrible people. E.g., see what's happening with the book that Gowon launched a couple of days ago. Look at the comment section across social media. Who are the people cursing him out? Igbos. Meanwhile, if they knew what he did to help their parents and grandparents, I don't even think they will still be grateful, Sha. But himself and Awo, those two that they really hate and curse out every time, actually did more for them and their parents and their grandparents than Ojukwu ever did. That is a fact. And I'll get to it today. I hope I finish on time, but whenever we finish, wherever we stop, we'll continue some other time, but I will read it today. What between Gowon and Awolowo, there's a reason Ukpabi Asika was able to achieve all the things he did achieve as the administrator of East Central State. It was because of the support of those people. Nobody talks about that. Just be crying we are victims. But why can they say they are victims? Because you did not say they were vanquished. So at the end of the day, it comes back to the leaders. It's about the leadership. You don't say things like, nobody really won or nobody really lost, so we're all brothers. No. A guy you lost, he won. Everything I'm doing for you from that point forward is based on benevolence. I don't owe you Jack. Turns out Jack is Jacobo Gowon as well. But you get the point. The £20 was called an ex-gratia payment. That's a big word for gift. And I need to play you a video of a man who eventually turns out to be, who became the Governor General of Juanes Ndigbo. So this is not a man, just a random person on the street. This is one of the people that led the apex sociocultural organization in Igbo land. He talked about how his father got £6,000 6 months after the war. But let me finish the statement about the ex-gratia payment. You see, 3 things happened that led to the £20 policy. Again, £20 was based on the magnanimity of Nigeria. It was not a debt that was owed. Why am I saying this? Is it because I hate a group? No. It's because I love Yoruba people and I love Nigeria. One of the things that people have done to us, why do we have a lot of people joining obedient movement and just castigating their own people, insulting their own fathers in the name of politics? It's because they've been made to hate where they come from. They've been told that somehow they owe a certain part of Nigeria something. There are 3 things. Number 1, people took money and returned to the south, so they had their bank accounts. Number 2, some people actually withdrew their money and handed it over to Ojukwu and converted it to Biafran pounds. Now, number 3, some of the people that had money were able to, something happened, right? And it happened in 67. What happened was that Ojukwu sent his boys to Benin during the Midwest invasion. They looted Central Bank Benin and carted away £2 million. By the way, most of the things that people are saying is based on pain. It's pain. It's pain talking. Carted away £2 million. He also looted banks and post offices in Calabar and in Port Harcourt. Someone says robbed, not loot. Okay, maybe so. Took all that money and then was going to use the money to buy weapons for Nigeria. At this point, I think I should read. I'm thinking how much can we read because of time? Let me just tell you because of time. I'll tell you what happened. He took £2 million, right? and then stole money from other places. The idea was to use the money to buy weapons in order to fight the Nigerian government. Nigerian government, of course, caught wind of what happened. They knew that they had stolen the money. So what did they do? Awo came up with an idea, and he talked about it in his 1983 interview. It was like, we've got to change the design of the Naira. And they had a 19-day window for people to change that currency. And they did that because they were going to make the money that Ojukwu stole useless. All right. So what he did was, within the first couple of weeks in January of 1968, we wanted to quickly change the currency. Now, some Igbo people were able to change that currency. One of them her name was Angeli Okori. Angelina Okori was a woman who was selling things to Nigeria, to Biafran forces, but she always had access to Nigeria. She would travel to Nigeria, buy stuff. So when the change happened, and you'll find our story in a CNN report, when the switch happened, she was able to change her money to the new currency. All right. Now, such people got their monies. But there's another group of people, they are taking their money and giving to Ojukwu and receive Biafran pounds instead. Now, those ones, after the war, decided to bring that money, expecting that Nigeria would collect the worthless notes, and give them Nigerian pounds. Now, that makes no sense, because the money had no value. It wasn't even worth the paper on which it was printed. So how exactly would Nigeria collect worthless money and then give you Nigerian money? The other group was the group that did not change their money at the time. Those ones, there's no way you're going to bring fake old notes 2 years after and tell me to give you the value of today because I love you or that we are one Nigeria. They changed the currency January 1968. The war ended January 15, 1970. There is no way they will now say, oh, because you are a good person, we'll now take the old notes that, because of course you always have a window. If you want to change, whether change currency or change design, it still happened during the last election. It's not something you just leave open forever, because you're trying to protect your economy. The third group was the people who were able to actually find the proof that they had savings, whether it was past books and so on and so forth, that they were able to present as evidence that they still had money. One of them was John Nwodo's father. I'd like you to take a listen to John Nwodo, who, like I said earlier, became the Governor General of Waneze Ndigbo, and what he said about how his father got his money back after the war. Please take a listen.
But that £6,000 that was left in the money, my father discovered it 6 months after the war, when the manager of Barclays Bank then, which is now Union Bank, called him and revealed to him that he had £6,000 plus interest, which were not tampered with during the course of the war. My dad then decided to buy a Mercedes lorry bus. That time in the southeast, all the vehicles that were there had been used during the war, and many had been cannibalized, and the few that survived were smoking or hardly in any good condition to traverse state territories. There was no farming throughout the war, and a lot of people who were compressed in few communities where the war did not reach did not have enough food cultivated in those communities to sustain them. So all the food that were coming to the east were brought from the west and the north, principally from the north. And so all the transporters had it. But that £6,000 that was left in the money, my father discovered it 6 months after the war, when the manager of Barclays Bank then, which is now Union Bank, called him and revealed to him that he had £6,000 plus interest, which were not tampered with during the course of the war.
The father left some money in the bank before the war, £6,000. And then 6 months after the war, the bank called his father and told him that, listen, you have money here. As a matter of fact, you even have interest. His father wasn't the only one. There were many who got their money back. Most of these people crying around, If I say what I want to say, it's just going to feel as if somebody doesn't have empathy. But the truth of the matter is that a lot of people got their monies back. If you could provide proof, in fact, in this particular case, it wasn't even the father, according to him, it wasn't even the father trying to talk to the bank to collect his money. It was the bank reaching out to him to tell him that he has money with them. And there are many examples of this, by the way. So what do you see here? You see three examples like I mentioned earlier. Number one were the group that gave their money to Ojukwu and collected Biafran pounds. So here's the question I want to ask you. If you as a person, for whatever reason, decide, maybe for, I don't know, maybe patriotism or whatever reason, decide to give Ojukwu your money. Ojukwu then runs away to Cote d'Ivoire, leaving you empty-handed. Should you be looking for Ojukwu to give you your money back, or should you be looking to Nigeria to reimburse you? Like, we owe you nothing now. It wasn't like Nigeria owed Igbos or anything. Ojukwu was the one who collected that money. Ojukwu and Biafran Force. By the way, they have this, the governor of Central Bank of Biafra, them, his first name was Sylvester. There were supposed to be two people in the committee. The other one was a professor who was fighting the war. He was the only one at home, was the governor, was the secretary. He said it in an interview. I just want to read tonight because of time. There was no basis for the currency. And when they stole the money, and like I always say, the primary problem was the fact that Awolowo spoiled the money that Ojukwu had stolen. By the time the government began to change the currency design, Ojukwu sent his people to every financial capital of the world. They were in New York, they were in London, carrying briefcases of naira, trying to sell to as many people as they could. On the date we were Pariton, they found 7 suitcases. If you read the book by John de St. John, 7 suitcases of Nigerian pounds they found in London airport. They found suitcases in New York. By the time the dust settled, Ojukwu had lost about 30 million pounds. That's actually waiting they paying people. Now the pain Ojukwu they transfer to these ones, we just talk nonsense. Ojukwu lost 30 million pounds because of that single policy. And I also said that Ojukwu himself said that that policy was actually the major policy that destroyed their chances. Why? Because yes, they had foreign reserves, but they had a lot of money in naira. And they had also stolen a lot of money from banks. And for you to change the design abruptly and give only 19-day window means that you've essentially scuttled their plan, which was actually the real problem. So 30 million pounds was the reason for this wahala. And in order to look good, and this is what Ojukwu did over and over again at different points in his career, during that Biafra saga, he would find a way to pin whatever it is on someone else in order to extricate himself. So, for instance, when the war turned against them, who did he blame? He blamed Ifeanyi and Victor Banjo, and he killed them. Read the trial of Biafra's leaders. Look at the Suntofi Victor Banjo Koloriko said makes no sense. But he has to find somebody else, like a scapegoat. There's always a scapegoat for him and his propagandist. And he's never responsible for anything. He's always the other people. Just like the clowns who are talking in the comment section, right now. And I see you, but I'm not going to respond to you just yet. Now, here's a question. Why did Nigeria give $20, 20 pounds? Again, it was a gift. I'm a Yoruba man. We were taught to be thankful, to be grateful to anybody who gave us something. In other words, we don't go around castigating a generous person. We're supposed to be grateful. These ones who have been crying about 20 pounds, it was a gift that you should be grateful for. It was not a debt that was owed to you. Now, let me read something to you. What's the value of 20 pounds in 1970? In Nigeria, it was essentially, so at the time in Nigeria, that's around 1970, a laborer don't share kini menial jobs, okay, earned about 10 pounds a month. That's an unskilled government laborer. Like it could be a driver, it could be working for the government. Gets 10 pounds, at most 14. What the government did was to give people 2 months, essentially the 2 month salary of a junior worker, a very junior worker, so that they're able to get back to their lives. They're able to get back wherever they came from, because they couldn't even stay in the southeast. So transportation, moving back and settling wherever you were before the war, you could use that to go back. But was that everything Nigerian government gave the southeast? No. If you read the book Go On, the Biography of a Soldier Statesman by J. Sawelaigo, he mentioned that 5 million naira was given to African Continental Bank. As a matter of fact, it was actually two banks. So when you read that, you have to put things together. When you read Awolowo's account, 3.5 million pounds, by the time we put everything together, was given to Azikiwe's bank, African Continental Bank. Another tranche was given to Cooperative Bank of Eastern Nigeria. Why did the federal government put money in those banks? Because they were the banks that Igbos were using. So in their minds, Igbos will be able to access loans to start their businesses. And did they get those loans? Yes. Do you hear about it in the streets? No. 20 pounds, 20 pounds, 20 pounds, 20 pounds. That's the only thing you hear. The federal government put money, and the Minister of Finance at the time was Awo. And by the way, if a Yoruba person, I say it 1,000 times, you have nothing to be ashamed of. You have no business acting like you owe anybody anything in this country. You owe nobody nothing but love and respect. Love everybody, respect everybody. God is good to all of us. We're one Nigeria, a great nation. But that I owe you something, to tell that no, I don't owe you jack. Awo did not owe anybody anything. You cannot use Awo to say, Awo did something. Awo did the best that your fathers could not do. That's the truth. And I say that with all respect. If I can, I don't know. The point is, they put 3.5 million pounds in African Continental Bank. That's Azikiwe's own bank, because people will be able, so that people will be able to access loans and use that to start their businesses. So the 20 pounds was go back so that you can get back to wherever you were before the war, and then you can settle, because we can't just begin to give you money anyhow. The economy will tank now. We did not tell you to go and give the money to Ojukwu to collect Biafran pounds. We did not tell you not to be in Nigeria to change that currency where the currency design was changed in January of 68. You can't come 2 years later and say, okay, I had one. Think about it today. Can you go anywhere in Nigeria and say, okay, oh, I had 150 naira better life, give us polymer? They won't answer you now, because there was a particular period of it's monetary policy, isn't it? So there is no way on earth Nigeria is going to be paying that. If you want someone to hold responsible, that's Ojukwu. He collected your parents' money and then he jackpot. That is, go and talk to him. The Biafran pound that you're bringing back wasn't even you couldn't even buy you toilet paper. So how exactly would Nigeria collect that money and give you pounds? However, those who had money in banks and had proof were able to get their monies back, even if it was a billion pounds, if anything like that ever existed. And an example, we played an example earlier of John Nyanwodo, who was the President General of Ohaneze Ndigbo, talking about his own father, how he got 6,000 pounds from Barclays Bank. That story also needs to be told. Now, which one did I say earlier? 3.5 million pounds, under 5 million naira. Money was given. At this point I have to open. I want to mention the exact figures. I think good. I opened it somewhere here. Let me read something to you. 6 million naira was spent on the rehabilitation of industries. African Continental Bank got 5 million naira for its reopening. University of Nigeria, Nsukka, got 12 million naira for reconstruction. Does anybody say anything like this? No, just let's cry. We're not crying again. Let's tell ourselves the truth and let the devil be ashamed. Nsukka, UNN got 12 million naira for its reconstruction. ACB got 5 billion naira. By the time they put everything together, it was 3.5 million pounds. So it was even more than 5 million naira. CBEN, Cooperative Bank of Eastern Nigeria, also got money. The money that was supposed to go to the East Central states throughout the war, guess what Awo did with that money? He kept it. He saved it. When we listened to General Gowon earlier, he mentioned how they appointed Ukwabi Asika. That money, the bulk of that money, Awo took it together and gave it to Ukwabi Asika. Gave it to the administrator of the Eastern region. Then every month, they were given subvention of £990,000 on a monthly basis. And later, of course, the other states also wanted, so they also started getting subventions. But first of all, all the money that should have gotten that they should have gotten during the war, I'll put it together and give it to them. And they got £990,000 every month. This is apart from what state governments and individuals did in Nigeria. And I'll read some of those things. I don't want to read. I will just be telling you to Shenka and sing. So there was food. All right. There was food. There was resources. Sorry. There was food. There was medicine, clothes from different parts of Nigeria. A lot came from the Yoruba area. Churches, governments, and individuals. You find all of that in this book. Go on, the biography of a soldier statesman. Please power tap on TikTok. It wasn't just £20,000. Also, Gowon called for volunteers to help rebuild the southeast. He called for doctors, nurses, engineers, technicians, builders, plumbers, mechanics, administrators, skilled hands. In a short time, 15 doctors and 50 nurses were rushed to the Igbo Heartland to embark on mercy operations alongside 900 Nigerian Red Cross officials and 114 foreign Red Cross officials. In addition, the federal government made available 2 million naira, that's 1 million Nigerian pounds then, for relief activities. There were 700,000. They were feeding 700,000 people daily in the eastern states. The Red Cross stockpiled 10,000 tons of food. Mumbo, there's one I want to read. I hope I find it. Where people actually, okay, I found it. It says here, the Nigerian Red Cross Society performed admirably well. They fed, clothed, and provided medical care for the ordinary citizen. Their work, listen to this, their work was made a bit easier by the cooperation of individual Nigerians and state governments all over the country who donated food, cash, and other forms of aid towards providing relief for their brothers. Where I come from, when people do a good turn deserves another. When people do something like this, what you do, you thank them. You say, no, ojo. Not that you be like, you could have done better. You could have done better. See what you did to me. I didn't owe you jack. Since you don't have sense to be thankful, let's tell you the truth. Nobody owed you nothing. There's something I want to play. I hope I find it. When people were returning, I want to play you two clips. I'm going to play you two clips of what happened in the Rivers area and what happened in Yoruba land in Lagos after the war and what our fathers said. Thinking back right now, I don't even think they did the right thing, to be honest. But again, I think they were being omoluabi. If you go and become omoluabi to an ingrate, you now be wondering, why did I even help you in the first place? If you're going to be, making look as if I owe you something or I owed you. Take a listen to this, please. This is after the war, Rivers area. This is the response of folks in Rivers area. Take a listen, please.
Asked some Rivers men what they thought of the Igbos.
It was, though we are all one Nigeria, but they misbehave themselves, and we feel at the moment, at this time, they should remain in their East Central state.
You don't think there is a place for them to work down here now?
At the moment, I don't think so.
Do you think it will come in the future?
That future can tell.
But not now?
Not now.
Those are Rivers people talking about whether they wanted Igbos to return after the war. You see how welcoming they were, Abi? Okay. Listen to what your own fathers, your Bible, listen to what they said after the war. Take a listen. Someone says on TikTok, we are too forgiving. That's a robodo. Greater Me says, these rivers people saw them for who they were. I guess so. He's the one who said, come back home, come back home. That's the one that, we have to find a way to even tell that they should have done more. The one who said, don't come. Maybe that one even knows what he's talking about. We are just doing good people, great nation. I think we've answered that for now. So £20 was a gift, was not a debt, and it was not the only thing that was done for the Igbos. It was not the only thing. A lot was done, and I mentioned some of it. I mentioned the £3.5 million that went to African Continental Bank for Igbos to borrow money to start their businesses. I mentioned another amount that was given to Cooperative Bank of Eastern Nigeria so that they could get loans to start their businesses. They didn't start from the scratch like they always tell you. We got £20 million, we got £20, and everybody started over again. Number one, £20 was 2 months' salary of a junior worker to help you get back where you're coming from, and then you had access to loans to restart your lives. £12 million naira went to University of Nigeria, Nsukka, to rebuild the school. The entire money that was saved for 3 years, for 2.5 years, 30 months, from July all the way, was given to the administrator of the East Central State. £990,000 on a monthly basis that's about £1 million on a monthly basis given to that East Central State. So the idea that and Ukpabi Asika that we're always mentioning, it was credited to rebuilding the Eastern region very fast. He did that because he was supported by the same government that you want us to criticize. Now, if you're a Nigerian, love everybody, respect everybody, but do not let anyone gaslight you into thinking that you owe them something. Because what I'm about to play right now will probably make you angry. But let's continue listening to the young lady.